to a God who can speak things into existence? Is it more than just us jumping into a puddle, but it just zings us hard? I mean, that's so.
Yeah. No, the more I live, the more I work in ministry, especially the more I agree with that way of identifying ourselves. For too many years, theologically, what you just stated, I always agreed with, but in reality, in my own ministry, I really allowed myself to get to a place of feeling like I really did have to perform. If I'm obedient to God, then I will be doing these things. And as a result of doing these things, more people will come to Christ. And if more people come to Christ, my church will get bigger. And through this long series of processes that I put myself through, it ended up with bigger church, therefore equals my obedience. And my obedience will equal a bigger church. And no matter how much I tried to explain that away theologically, it simply wasn't in keeping with what I know of the character of God.
Well, what were some of the
And,
questions, I didn't mean to talk over
it's fine.
what were some of the questions that you started to ask yourself as you walked through that process and that voice and realizing, wait a minute, this isn't the path that maybe I'm supposed to be on? Or
Yeah, I mean, question number one was, why isn't this stuff working? All of the church growth stuff that um, is supposed to work, that they don't say it, but the feeling is it's inevitable. If you do this, follow these directions, this will happen. And if it's not happening, therefore you must not be following the directions correctly. So the first question was, wait a minute, it's not working out that way for me. These ingredients are not resulting in this recipe. It doesn't taste the way it's supposed to taste. There's something. So, but I'm doing all of the processes. And then it turns out it's church leadership and church growth and church health is not a recipe where you put in a certain number of ingredients and you get out a final product. It's simply that it's not a good metaphor for us to use. It's not a figure of speech that's going to get us there. It is closer to what you started this whole thing with. It's more like God as a parent. And I love the grandparent image, because as a grandparent now, I understand the way I relate with my grandkids is probably closer to the way God relates to me than I related to my own kids.
Yeah, and I totally understand that.
Yeah. There's a grace there. There was a certain amount of performance expectation with the kids. You have to behave yourself because you're a reflection of our family. And I hope I didn't lay them that heavily on them. They've told me that I didn't, but I know I did that probably more than I should have. But not the grandkids. The grandkids are just like,
Oh yeah,
it's
you can do whatever you want. Just jump in my arms, man. I'm just happy when I hear the what is it, the little tone come off on my wife's phone, and it's a incoming, Facebook or a Messenger live thing or whatever. I'm like, oh, I'm excited. It's going to be my Brady boy calling, I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for those of you who are theologically concerned, we are not saying that we are God's grandkids. We're using the feelings of grandparenthood to relate to the feelings. I always want to be careful of that, because we know on the internet somebody just go, God has no grandkids. Yes, we get it. Not what we're talking. We're not making a theological statement here. We're talking about the love of a grandparent compared to the love of God for us. That's it. That's as far as it goes. So anyway.
There we go. Well, yeah. Hey, you wrote an article the other day, and basically, I'm going to paraphrase for you. You just basically said, I'm freaked out.
Yeah. I don't know what day it is half the time. I mean, several times during the day, every day, I have to remind myself what day it is.
Mm-hmm.
My sleep patterns are completely screwy. I've gone from several weeks of not being able to sleep more than 3 hours at a time to the last few nights, 9-10 hours, and getting up like I still didn't sleep far enough, but I got to get up because I got to talk to Troy. It wasn't quite that bad.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
I got up well before 1 p.m. today. That's okay. But yeah, those are happening, and those are very, very real. And I'm in a situation where I am not sick. Nobody that I know very personally is sick. Nobody that I know personally has passed away. So the trauma I'm experiencing is so trivial compared to the very real trauma being faced by very many people. I haven't even lost income. So I am gauging all of that. I'm living in a place of great privilege, but that doesn't mean that my trauma is not real trauma. And it doesn't
No,
mean
absolutely.
that my body and my spirit and my emotions are not going to react because of that trauma. So I think here we are, on Good Friday, and Christianity has never, ever shied away from acknowledging the very, very bad parts of the world.
Mm.
Right? Christianity has never had a reputation for pretending everything's great when it's not. We take one day every single year. It is one of our top 3 most important days of the year to honor the biggest tragedy that ever happened in human history. And we call it Good Friday.
Right, right.
Because we lean into the reality of sin and its consequences completely. Because Easter doesn't mean anything if Good Friday isn't horrific.
Mm.
So, but sometimes we want to jump to the happy. The happy and the joyous is more joyous after we've acknowledged the reality of the negative. Now, we don't make up the negative, but you don't need to. There's plenty of negative around. So
you don't have to go looking for it.
Yeah. So in this trauma, if you're feeling lousy, if you're feeling confused, if you're a church leader like I am, I'm supposed to be providing leadership for others, and I can barely get out of bed.
Mm.
So I have to lay it aside and go, I cannot let that cause me to feel guilty, because we are all experiencing trauma right now, and trauma requires rest. So we have to adjust to that.
That's one of the questions, and I've interviewed plenty of pastors over the past 7 years. And one of the things that in the 12-step program, they have a word called HALT, right? Hunger, angry, lonely, and tired, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those,
right.
All the, and we're in those states. We don't function like we should. And just talk about rest. When I interviewed you first, one of the first times, you said, rest made it into God's top 10.
Yep. Yeah, it's that important. And especially during seasons of trauma like this. I think a handful of things are extremely important. I think rest is at the top of that list. I think laughter is near the top of that list. If laughter is not inappropriate during times of trauma, laughter is essential during times of trauma.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
Laughter is not inappropriate during times of trauma. Laughter is essential during times of trauma. You can go through anybody who's experienced real trauma, from horrific things like, the Holocaust and war, and you will find moments of crazy, bizarre humor where people just find, and I've heard, I'm trying to recall some of the movies now, where like a Holocaust movie where there'll be this moment of absurdity in the middle of it.
Right.
And these people who are experiencing a trauma greater than anything I can imagine find themselves laughing themselves silly. And the relief that brings, laughter is a gift from God, just as rest is a gift from God. And we have to, especially during times of trauma, we cannot be focused entirely on producing things, on reaching goals. In trauma, yes, I do think, and hopefully we'll talk about it, some of the things we can begin to prepare for now to come out and to recover when it's over. So we need to do that, but we need those breaks where for this entire day of Sabbath, I am going to worship, I am going to sleep, and I am going to laugh.
Right.
And I believe God is honored in that.
Absolutely. And what about the other, I think there's a two-pronged thing, this gratitude. Being thankful, even when, and I remember, and I don't remember where the quote was, but you talked about the Holocaust earlier. There was a Holocaust survivor, and she said, even in the midst of that, there were days where if I looked hard enough, I could be grateful for something, whether I got a little bit more soup and you went, oh. And so how can we be more intentional about being gracious and grateful?
Yeah. Gratefulness, we live in a culture in which we have confused gratefulness with giving. Too often what happens, especially in church leadership, it's like, oh, the offerings are down, let's do a giving sermon, right? That's too little too late, and it's completely missing the mark. What we need instead is we need, as followers of Jesus, to understand what it's like to live as grateful people. And then because you can give without being grateful, but you cannot be grateful without giving. And I would much rather be among people who lived lives of gratefulness than to be among people who were massive donors to causes. Because I've been around people who are massive donors to causes and they are massive something else too. Right?
Right.
Right. They're not pleasant to be around because every gift comes with a string attached, or they want their name on a brick somewhere, or right. Forget that. That's not gratitude. But when we live a life of gratitude, there's it's got that interesting rhyme to it, the attitude of gratitude. But gratitude is an attitude that changes us from the inside out and allows us to see things, I believe, more accurately because we're seeing it more fully. You can be in the middle of trauma, but there is something to be grateful for. And that's not a denial of the trauma. It's simply bringing another aspect of reality into the trauma. You're not only seeing the trauma, you are seeing other things as well. And you can have a more balanced life, a more balanced way of getting through the trauma if you acknowledge the parts that are truly there to be grateful for. We're not talking about, the positive. What was the name of the character from SNL 30 years ago of I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, right?
Right.
And we appropriately laughed at that, the absurdity of that, because we're not talking about that. We're not talking about saying words like a mantra to somehow convince ourselves. We're talking about actually finding real things and real places where God has blessed and is blessing us, and live in an attitude of gratitude over that.
You said a couple words, fully, or being able to see more fully, and then finding, right? And is part of this kind of almost a treasure hunt where we start to look for these things, and then when we were able to see them more, we can see even more.
Yes. Have you ever bought something like, I'll just use a car for instance, and I never heard of that car. You end up buying that car, and now you see that car everywhere.
And if it's white, you see all the white ones.
Exactly. So you find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for things to be wrong with the government response to the COVID-19 crisis, all you're going to find is things that the government does wrong in response to the COVID-19 crisis. If you're looking for ways to be grateful that we live in a very imperfect culture with a very imperfect government, but quite frankly is so much better than most of the governments that have ever existed in human history, if you're going to look for the positive, you'll find some positive there too. That doesn't mean you deny the negative. That doesn't mean that everything that whatever your party says or does is perfect. That's a bunch of nonsense that we've got too much of. But if you look for places to be grateful, they do exist. And then if you're looking for it, you find what you're looking for. And then it becomes an attitude adjustment from the inside. And then grateful people tend to be generous people. And when they do that, it's not about getting more stuff. It's about, I'm grateful, therefore I become generous, and therefore I increase other people's reasons to be grateful because of my generosity.
So it becomes something that actually is like when we plant a tree or something, there's growth from it, and there's a result of it. There's shade, and there's fruit, and there's, just because we've jumped into this. And like you said, if we're more grateful, we're able to show the world the beauty of the world and what we see, and be able to share those things. And then we start to see those things as opposed to some of the negative. And like you said,
if you're refusing to look for it, you will excuse even good things away as bad things. But if you're looking to be grateful, and again, I'm not talking about pretending or faking it. There are actual real things to be grateful for, and keeping an actual realistic eye open for it, you will find them.
We'll talk about this real quick. And I think we skipped this many times. We've got one book of it, Lamentations, and then we've got David and the Israelites all the way through Psalms, just saying, what is going on in my life? Everybody's running after me. These wicked people are getting away with stuff. Why is my life in the dumps and everybody else is doing well? Why don't we embrace that more, as opposed to everybody's happy?
Because it feels terrible.
Yeah.
I understand the dangers of comfort, but I prefer being comfortable to being uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
I understand the dangers of never acknowledging the negative parts of my life, but it's still unpleasant to do so. And so we're built to, avoid pain and seek pleasure. And so what we have at all times is we have two realities coexisting in our lives at all times. We've got the immediate reality of our feelings and of our of what we feel, touch, the things through the five senses.
Yeah.
Then we've got a deeper reality that God is greater than my current trauma. And it is unhealthy to live only in one or only in the other. So you've got some people who only live, they're Eeyores, and all they ever live in is the negative tactile experience that they're going on right now. Oh, it's all horrible. Oh, it's all terrible. And everything they say about what's bad may be accurate, but it's incomplete.
Right.
The deeper truth is, greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. Christ will overcome. Good Friday is followed by Easter. And then there are other people who only want to live on Easter Sunday morning and never acknowledge Good Friday.
Right.
And that is equally problematic. They say it's faith, but in fact it's denial in a lot of, only this time they're denying the negative, where on the other side it's denial of the positive. And denial is never a healthy way of approaching life. We've got to get past that. We've got to acknowledge both sides, especially as a leader. One of my favorite sayings about leadership is that the leader's first job is to define reality. And that means defying the uncomfortable and uncertain parts of reality, as well as the comfortable ones, the ones we like. So we deny it because it's unpleasant, but leadership maturity require that we acknowledge even the difficult parts.
And how about, you talked about leadership is defining reality. What about our own reality of our own weakness?
Yeah, well, the first reality we need to acknowledge is our own personal reality. You can't lead others unless you're leading yourself properly, right? If you're sitting around and not even acknowledging either your own reasons to be grateful or your own difficulties, then how are you going to lead others into a balanced emotional or spiritual life? So it has to start with us. It has to start with a healthy place, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually, socially. All of those things are vital. And then out of the overflow of living a dynamic and healthy and gratitude-filled life, that is where we get a chance to bless others. How many times have we seen over the last few years, and we will over the next few years, because it's human history, a leader with great skills, with great talents, with great charisma, who has burned everything that they built to the ground overnight because of a character flaw. Right? We see it over and over, and we will continue to see it until we're in heaven with Jesus, because that's the nature of fallen humanity. It's not about, it's not the nature of leadership, it's the nature of people. So if we want to build something of value, if we want to bring something of blessing to others, it will not be built on the back of our skill set or our gift mix. It will be built on the back of our character.
Wow.
That's the foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. And our character does matter, doesn't it?
Oh, everything else is trivia. It just is. Now, if you can add to great character some good skill sets, and you can add to character a good team dynamic, well, then you've got something even more valuable. But if you've got great skills and got a great team, but it's built on bad character, you're just setting yourself up for disaster. Character is everything.
Yeah, I was just you're talking about these different realities and different voices, and Seth Godin said it this way. He says, because we're human, we start with two things. What's the story I'm telling myself, and what's the story I'm telling everyone else?
Yeah. I heard, I can't remember who it was who said it not long ago. They were talking about their company, and that somebody was asking them, what's your brand and your company? And the response was, our brand is what our friends tell their friends. And I paused for a minute. I thought, that's really interesting. So she's not saying our brand is what we tell our friends. No, it has to pass through. And it's not what our enemies are saying about us. So the most accurate reflection of who we are isn't what we think we are. It isn't what we tell other people. It's not even what our enemies say about us. First of all, it's who Christ says I am, but he's our friend. He's for us.
Right.
So on a human level, the most accurate reflection of who we really are is when our friends talk about us, what do they say about us?
Wow.
I think there's something really wise in that.
Well, we were talking yesterday on the phone and talking about what a friend says about someone else. And I, and I said, what about you, that I've just seen this, and there's a incredible faithfulness that you have, not only to what you know now is kind of, what do you want to do when you grow up, your mission, and then to others, especially small pastors. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is you've put together this, we're acknowledging right now the now, but the what next, and some of the tools. I mean, you've literally put together a bunch of tools, and then they're going to be aggregated and curated, and there may be even some incredible partners that are going to help you out, and just, so let's talk about some of those things.
Yeah, I about 3 weeks ago, I had conversations with a couple different small church pastors, and they had both ordered my new book, 100 Days to a Healthier Church, and they both had it in their house. And I'm not saying this to sell the book. This is just how the conversation happened to go. And both of them said virtually the same thing. I ordered this book thinking, hey, it would be great if my church was healthier in 100 days. And then both of them said, I can't bring myself to read it because I look at the title and I go, I don't know if my church is going to be around in 100 days. And I thought, wow, that really is where it is. I think most big churches are probably going to come out of this and maybe even be larger for a while because of the online audience and because of people desiring spiritual things right now.
Right.
But I think in smaller churches, especially, some of them are not going to survive this. And those that do survive, who weren't on the edge before, might be on the edge. And their recovery time is going to take quite a bit of time, longer than 100 days for sure. So I started thinking about, what do we need that is unique to us and our needs as small church pastors, to do two things. One, to adapt to the current situation, because a lot of what we're hearing about there about how to adapt now is coming from a bigger church perspective. Hey, here's how to look into the camera. And the small church pastor is going, okay, where do I get a camera? Is my iPhone okay?
Right.
How do I plug it in? After I do record it, where do I put that? And, a bigger church pastor hands it off to the tech team, and God bless that they've got a tech team so that the pastor can now go on and do other things of value. But in a small church, I call it the weight of technology. It doesn't ease our burden. It's an extra burden, because if it's going to be done, it's got to be done by that pastor, because maybe they got a church filled with seniors, and maybe even half of them, even if I do put my service online, they aren't even going to be able to see it because they don't have internet. They don't get on the internet. I mean, if you're younger and you're in a bigger church, that may be impossible for you to even comprehend, but that is in a lot of situations right now.
Right.
So I thought, here we've got all of this. We're trying to figure out how to adapt, and small church adaptation will look different than big church adaptation. And then secondly, we're going to have months, and I believe years, of serious recovery from this, to try to figure out how to get back in shape financially and emotionally, and how do we use our buildings now in a different way than we did before because of the lessons we've learned from this. So I thought, we just need help in this. And so what I've done is I'm putting together a team, and right now we're going to be calling it Spark Online. And it was just Spark until about 2 hours ago. And I talked with the team, and they said, because it stands for Small Church Pastor Adapt and Recover Kit. Right. And their response was, a kit sounds like a thing you get in a box. And it's all going to be online. So I said, well, let's just call it Spark Online. Oh, okay. So Spark Online is the idea of, how do we as small church leaders and pastors lead our churches to adapt to this and then to recover afterwards. And so it's going to be basically a website within a website at karlvaters.com. Right now, there's just a landing page. You can go there. So if you go to karlvaters.com/spark, you'll see the landing page. It'll tell you what's coming. But we are working on strategic partnerships with everybody from Compassion International to INCM, which is Children's Ministries, to Rural Compassion, which will help small church pastors, to Church Tax and Law, which will help with legal and tax issues. We've got help for youth. I just shot a small webinar that we'll be putting up next week with 2 youth leaders talking about small church youth, finance help. So a lot of this will be coming with strategic partners who will be speaking specifically to a small church situation. We'll be putting up articles of encouragement. So we're going to find everything we can, from written articles to all 3 of my books are now discounted in ebook format for 99 cents, because we just want to get these materials into people's hands. It's not about selling them. So if you go to the Spark page, You can't get it through Kindle. Kindle won't let us do 99 cents. So $2.99 for the Grasshopper Myth, but 99 cents direct from Moody, my publisher. They just said, yeah, I asked them and they said, let's do it. Let's just get it in people's hands. No, we're not making money off of books at 99 cents a piece. We hope we'll eventually recover the expenses, but we don't even know if that'll happen. At this point, who cares? We just want to put the resources in people's hands. So we are assembling this in about 10 days or 2 weeks, probably. Okay. We'll do a big launch of it. But in the meantime, we're still adding bits and pieces as we find them so that small church pastors, small church leaders, small churches without a leader can go to a central clearinghouse where every day as it gets going, more and more will be added. So you can click on adapt and there'll be a drop down for adapt for youth, for seniors, for rural, for bivocational, and then, or you can hit recover. And how do we start recovering financially? Where is there pastoral care help that I can find a counselor? Those kinds of things. It's not all set up yet, but the structure is being put together for it.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I've got a special guest that I talked to. She, Mandy Smith, who wrote The Vulnerable Pastor. I'm going to have her come in.
Great.
Hopefully she'll come in. Should see here. Comment. Okay, we'll hit her video. I think she's got unmute. Oh, there she is.
Can you see me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Hi.
We can see you and hear you. Hi there.
Nice to see you guys.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Mandy. You are you are at UCC Cincinnati, correct?
Yes, University Christian Church.
And you wrote a book, and I had you on the Project Pastor podcast a couple years ago, and I remember. Do you remember where you were when we did the interview?
No, I don't. Where was I?
You were in your bathroom.
Oh yeah, that's where I usually do it. I know it seems fitting for a vulnerable pastor to be doing these things from the bathroom. Although my daughter moved out, so now I have a room. I don't have to sit in the bathroom anymore.
You get great. So. Well, hopefully you've kind of just sat back and saw what Karl's put together, and I really wanted to bring you on just to be an encouragement to other pastors, and that leading through their vulnerability and weakness, and that's what we need to do. Do you remember the quote that you told me? And this is one of the most poignant quotes I've ever heard in an interview, at least for me, about weakness, human weakness.
I'm afraid I don't.
Well, I'm gonna have to pull it up. Why don't you talk about?
There's one that I often say, which summarizes my book, which is that, let me see. The best ministry grows from reliance on God, and weakness teaches us reliance on God. And so weakness is a ministry resource. Is that it?
If not, that's a good one.
No. That is a very good one.
Yeah.
You're not going to discount that one at all as I come up with this one. But you said this, and you said it in the interview, and it was just so poignant at the time. And I've literally, probably this is the most poignant quote I've ever had of someone I've interviewed. You said, "It is a strange thing to be called into ministry by a God who can do everything. What reason would he have to call us? The only thing I can figure out is that we bring one thing he doesn't have, human weakness." And I know, at least me, we want to get rid of our weakness. I mean, we started this thing today. Facebook Live was not working, but so I'm scrambling. I go, we tried it two times. We started probably 5 minutes late, and, we're just like, hey, sorry guys. We went to YouTube, but just talk about this idea of human weakness and just embracing who we are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, vulnerability is not just choosing to say things about ourselves that feel like they're exposing our heart. I think the whole experience of being a human being is an incredibly vulnerable experience, that we run out of ideas, we get sick, we get tired, we get old, we can't control and fix everything and understand everything. And I think that Scripture absolutely has room for that. In fact, it sees that and is very honest about that and is fine with that. And at the same time, I think in the Western culture, we are just taught to be ashamed of those realities. If you look at any magazine, any kind of advertising that you come across, it's usually based on some way that we're ashamed of our limitation. And they're assuming, we're ashamed that we can't control our kids, and we want to be able to predict our financial future and control our careers and our bodies. And, you're getting old, so you need to fix that gray hair. And
no
so,
hair.
oh, I wasn't talking about you personally. I was talking about you in general. So we're faced with this conundrum of being in these limited bodies and minds and experiences. And I love the stories of Jesus in the wilderness, that I think ultimately the enemy was tempting him to be ashamed of his human limitations. And I love the fact that at no point did he say, okay, I'm ashamed of those. And I think if he had been, he would have also been ashamed of us and our human limitation. And so I think it's a real culture. It's a moment where our faith and our culture collide, because our faith gives us a space for that human limitation, and in fact sees that as a potential for deep connection with God. And on the other hand, our culture says, if you have any sense of your limitation or your weakness or your inability to control or fix things, run away from that. Do everything you can to avoid that experience. And I think it really is bringing about some spiritual desert, some wasteland in our culture spiritually. But this moment right now is such an opportunity. I think if we're not used to that, it's very uncomfortable. But at the same time, I think Christians of all people should be able to say, all right, we've been thinking this for a while, but we're realizing it in more ways than ever before, that yes, we are not in control of the world, and it's okay. And I think it's incredibly uncomfortable, but at the same time, we can get used to the discomfort. I've been talking about this and wrestling with this for a long time, and I might look comfortable to you. I'm not comfortable. I'm just used to the discomfort more than I have been in the past.
Well, didn't Brene Brown say something like the thing that actually kills shame is empathy, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think that, shame, I've actually been doing some research recently on the difference between shame and guilt. And guilt often is an interaction with a system or a set of rules. And so we feel guilty because we've broken a rule, and we long for salvation in a way that makes us want to be forgiven or seem to be innocent. But shame culture, which is actually a predominant culture in the Eastern world and in many minority contexts, anywhere where people have a very close sense of community. Shame is more, I've been set aside from the community. I'm somehow not acceptable to the community. I'm out of relationship. I'm out of the family. And we're longing to be made right again with the people that we're in relationship or ultimately with God. And I think that we actually function out of that shame more than we really talk about in our culture usually.
Yeah, it sounds like an outcast.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the prodigal son story.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good. Well, both of you, Karl, I want to bring you back in. Stay on, Mandy. But one thing, I'm completely gracious. I was talking to Karl about the other day, and I started Project Pastor. I did this thing. I thought, well, gosh, I should interview a bunch of pastors and write some book. And nowhere near did I see the journey taking like 7 years, because I've always wanted to do one of these online, and it took me 7 years. I'm realizing that God's time is totally different than mine. That I'm gracious to be in this moment with both the relationships. And I think we miss this many times in life. The conversations that I've had are much greater than any education I could have ever had in the years, because probably over 140 interviews over the years. And but the relationships, I think if we miss that, especially as pastors, and I know this is true of a lot of pastors who don't have a close friend or someone they can just call up and say, hey, my world's going sideways, what do I do? Can you just at least listen to me for a few minutes? And I want you both to know, and those out there to how gracious I am that I've walked this journey. And Karl, the journey that you've walked for 30 years, you are so set in a spot to be such a help. And it's taken 30 years to probably get here. And Mandy, what you've done with your book is one of the most poignant books on human weakness that, especially for pastors, that I've ever read. So I just want you both to know how gracious and thankful I am for both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, right back at you too,
for-
Troy.
And so let's kind of wrap it up here. I've got one more person. I've got one more person to come in, and we will wrap it up. He's I'm going to admit him right now. It's Doug Bursch, so good friend of mine. So he's coming in. He's a pastor out of the Seattle area, co-pastors, Evergreen. Let's see. We will more. Let's see if I can get this thing. He's coming. You guys can.
Doug Bursch has one of the strongest Twitter games out there, let me tell you.
Absolutely. If I can get him up here. What do you guys?
I love it. I was able to talk about him, and he's got himself muted, so he can't answer back. Just leave it like that, Doug. This is perfect. Just leave yourself on mute. We're good. You just keep.
I just unmuted him, so there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
I thought you were going to wrap it up. I was getting ready to do the offering. And then...
Wow. Well, Doug wrote a book, your community book, and I don't have my notes up here. What was it called? It was a great book on community.
It's not important. I've been so encouraged by what everybody's been saying here. This is what I like about all the people you've had on is about weakness. And I don't want to drag anything on. I just want to add one thing, is that I just recently talked about on a podcast, don't help me until you know me. And I think, Karl, you're talking about that. And with weakness as well, is we can give people resources and advice and the 10 things you need to do before your church goes under. And pastors are notorious doers. You know, they want to do a bunch of stuff and fix a bunch of things. And denominations can be like that as well. And they're sending us all this stuff to help our churches not collapse. But for a lot of us, we just need people to know where we're at. And in order to do that, we need to express our weaknesses. They need to be mentionable. They need to be safe places for that. And we need to be honest about where we're at. And for me, I don't really need advice today. I just need someone to give me comfort. And I think some of us need to admit to that, where we can just say, I need comfort. I need someone to say, it's okay. You know, just to say, it's all right. I understand your pain. I understand your confusion. And just to, you know, like our loving Father does, right? Just says, I love you. I'm with you. Surviving is a good thing. You're just surviving. That's a good thing. And as both your guests said so well, you know, even when people are trying to help you, it can just feel like an accusation about what you're not doing right. And until someone really knows you, and this is important for all of us when we try to help people, if you don't know them first, it just becomes an accusation. And it's with family. Like, if you ever try to help your spouse or your kids, but if you don't know where their heart is, it just feels like another accusation of what you're doing wrong. So this is a great service just to help people. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to have needs. It's okay to be resourced. But first, we got to know where people are at. And if we don't know where people are at, we're not going to help them. Even if our intentions are to help them, we're just going to put another law or expectation on them. So this has been a great resource.
Wow, you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, honestly. And I was just reminded of you talking about when we get to know someone. I can get off the phone quickly with you because now, hey, I've got to go, and you're not offended because you know me, right? Or Karl.
No, I'm greatly offended. I just don't tell you. I just very offended. But no, I agree. Yes.
But that's so poignant that we develop relationships with one another in deep senses, that we walk and we get to know them. What's the question that Jesus asked in the end? Did you know me?
Yeah. Well, no one, here's one. I'm sorry, you guys got a long time, so I feel bad coming in the end here, but I'm a pastor and I'll talk endlessly unless you cut me off. But one of the things that I don't think we're talking honestly about, here's one of the concerns pastors have. Pastors are paid. And a lot of things they're paid for, they're not able to do right now. Or at least they think they're paid for that. And because they're not able to do that, they're kind of nervous about the fact that they're still getting paid, but they're not doing the stuff they used to do to get paid for. So what might they do? Well, I'll do stuff to prove my worth and to prove that I should be paid. So they might start doing a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be done. And so even in a congregational setting, we need to be honest about that reality where, okay, I'm in this struggle where normally I go visit a bunch of people, or normally we do a Wednesday night, a Sunday night of this and that, and all these different things. We can't do those things. And I feel bad or guilty and it depends. Some people are really struggling financially and they need to say during their streaming service, I need you to mail in that offering check. I need you to do those. But it's hard to express those honest expressions, right? Because we're supposed to serve everyone and be the servant of all and those sorts of things. But I think those issues are the ones we need to be honest about. And if it's a loving community, it should be strong enough to be able to handle that. And if it's not, well, this is a great time to form a loving community. And the people who are there at the end of this will be a really sweet, loving community. And that's what I'm hoping for. Those who get offended by that honesty don't really know what Christian community is about. And those who want to hear that, you're going to walk through this conflict in a way where you're going to grow sweeter and kinder and more loving and really be able to be honest, like you and I have been able to be honest. One of the reasons we can be honest is we've shared our hurts, our pains, and we've walked through seasons together.
That's beautiful, Doug.
Yeah.
Can I share one thing that I shared with my staff when all this first hit the fan? I was feeling exactly what you were saying, Doug, and I was watching my staff do the same thing, that we're like, well, how do we justify our existence if we're not doing all the things that we're used to doing? And I found myself just answering every text and answering every email and doing all the things. So I felt like I was still doing something, and it was starting to drive me crazy. I never normally work like that. Normally I have spaces in my days where I just am not interrupted and where I'm praying or reading or writing or whatever. And we often talk about the strange yoke that Jesus invites us into, where he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Like, that's crazy. When would we ever say to a friend who's tired, come and rest and take my yoke? It's a strange kind of yoke that somehow we rest and carry the yoke with him at the same time. And so we often say this at University Christian Church, that the world teaches us respond, 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 problem, respond, question, respond, email, respond, crisis around the world, respond. And Jesus says, rest, receive, respond. So we definitely still have a response. It's not going to a passivity of, oh, it's all up to God, so I don't have to do anything. But I think in the Western culture, we just don't know how to do either something different from it's all up to me or it's all up to God. And I think this partnership of bearing the yoke with Jesus means we rest first because it's not all up to us. And from whatever comes in that rest, it might be rest from like actually taking a nap. It might be rest by just going for a walk or spending time with the family or reading something for fun or whatever rest looks like. I found that God meets me in that rest so much more than he does when I'm busy doing all the emails or whatever I think I should be doing. And I just told my staff, rest every morning, be in scripture, go for a walk, be with your family. And every morning ask the Lord, what do you want for me to receive? And in that rest, it might be reach out to this one person, make a video with this encouragement, read this scripture. And apart from the basic things that we all know we all have to do all the time and applying for loans or whatever we're trying to do on a kind of financial level, I just gave them permission to say, whatever you receive from your rest in God, that's what I want you to do every day. And I've tried to take that advice myself too. And it feels like, okay, well, maybe God really is the one in charge of this church. And it feels crazy to imagine that he could prompt us every day to just do the things that come before us. But it's made me much less crazy to do that. And there's so much more fruit that's come from it because they're not ideas that I'm putting into place out of trying to justify my existence. They're ideas that come from resting in him and carrying the yoke with him. So if that's an encouragement to any other pastors, that's what I hope to share.
Yeah, I love what you said. You said the word permission. You're giving your staff permission to do that.
That's really good. I just really appreciate that. And you know how I was thinking about this, that many people are having to do second best or third best or just whatever they can to survive. And as a church, we give them permission by how we handle this. And I've noticed, like with Easter, people are like, well, we got to make Easter great. And so they're trying to do these really, and I don't want people to feel bad. If they love doing that and they're getting joy out of that, that's fine. But if we are modeling, you got to do everything perfect online and just as great and just as well, we're kind of putting that expectation on our congregations that they have to do everything perfect and well.
Yeah.
I would rather show them, you know what, we're trying our best. This is clearly not what we'd want to do. But then we're giving them permission that it's all right for you guys to do that. We do something, you know, we don't give up. We don't just lay in bed and, you know, just wish, you know, God returns. But there's this reality of that in not trying to make everything seem like it's normal or try to, you know, we're going to be the best church in town and all that stuff. We give them permission, and they see that. People see that, like, well, they're really anxious and maybe I need to be anxious. So I think we also get to model that imperfection and weakness in the way that we don't present a perfect expression of the body as we're trying to do these look like, I mean, we all look like hostages in these streaming videos. So
yeah, we do.
It's just, you know, it's an
We
imperfect
do,
expression. Let's not
okay.
pretend, you know.
That's funny. Yeah, we've actually found some amazing potential in making videos on our phones that are really, you know, they're in our homes. They're letting us be seen in our ordinary clothes and our ordinary lives. And people at my staff have been having a lot of fun with like getting the kids to, you know, the worship pastor had his kids dancing with him while he was leading the worship this week. And I was hearing a lot of mums at home this week who are just frustrated because they've got little babies and trying to homeschool their kids at the same time. And meanwhile, I'm kind of empty nesting here and I miss having kids around. So I decided to have a story time with Pastor Mandy. And I just read the Velveteen Rabbit onto a video this morning so that parents and kids can sit down together and just read the story together, or I'll read the story for them, I guess. And we made a silly, goofy video about because I recorded my first sermon outside in my backyard. And it was partly because my family was driving me crazy and I didn't want to record it on the inside of the house. So my husband and my son helped me make this crazy video of where I really recorded it outside, and they were like sewing and cooking and doing all kinds of stuff around me while I was trying to write my sermon. And so and we had like a video dance off among the church people. And then we compiled it all into a video, and just, I don't know, there's like unique opportunities actually for this to be, for us to show our humanness. And it's actually been kind of fun. But yeah, if it had to look polished and like we normally make it, then we'd be out of luck.
Yeah, Karl kind of led off with one of the first couple things. He talked about laughter, how important that is.
Yeah. The first sermon I ever preached in Bible college in the preaching class, the title was "Give God Your Second Best." And I actually made it the basis for one of the devotional days in my most recent book. And every time I say that, half the room grimaces like I've just spoken heresy, and the other half of the room nods with some, oh, okay, I get where you're going here. Because we've got this performance thing in our culture that says, give God your best. Yes, we should give God our best and our worst and everything in between. And right now, if second best is all you've got, that's good enough. So relax.
That's funny because my first sermon, I was not allowed to take preaching classes in the Bible college I went to. And I had never actually wanted to be a preacher. And I was associate pastor. And the preacher called me at 10 p.m. on Saturday night and said, I'm stuck in the airport. I won't be there in the morning. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm preaching tomorrow. So that was my first sermon. And it was on the loaves and the fishes. And I was basically like, I have crumbs. I actually cannot preach. And here I am. So it's probably a good way to start the preaching career.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. We all have crumbs and somehow God makes them into a feast.
He does.
Wow.
If we'll offer them.
Yes. Well, Karl, how about you benedict this thing and wrap it up? First of all, I just want to thank you all for coming on and just thank you for pouring into my life more than you probably know, all of you. And Doug, when you were talking, you just, I know you and I know you. And I'm like, the dad's going to cry. I'm going, me, I'm feeling this like the father who gives the bride away, like we're going to get him on camera. But just thanks for sharing your heart, and both Mandy and Karl as well. Thank you so much. I'm so thankful for all of you. So
thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Good to be with you. I'm taking 4 key words from this: rest, gratitude, laughter, and grace. So I think we can, I think if you go through this past hour, I think those 4 categories pretty much cover just about everything we talked about. And that's not a bad conversation to have in the middle of this.
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. Well, I promised something at the beginning of this. I've got this cup. So email me. I'll put it in the, I guess I'll put it in the YouTube link, and I'll put it in the Facebook link. I'll put my email there. First person who emails me with something poignant that they listen to this, I'll send these books out to you. Unless you're like in Timbuktu and it's, I'm talking continental U.S. And if you're somewhere else and you've watched this, and I'll buy you the e-copy and get it sent to you. Okay. And I literally, my wife was giving me a hard time. I'm literally I can't believe it. I literally endorsed his book down here. So
Yeah.
Kind of cool. So just like I said, give me an email. I'll put the links below. And just thanks a bunch, you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.